In life, there are a few immutable truths. Cheese is the single greatest food group, the moon landing was faked, and Respawn makes games with incredibly fun movement mechanics. Since its release, Titanfall 2 has been hailed as one of the single greatest first-person shooters ever made, so much so that fan outcry for a Titanfall 3 has become an internet pastime much the same as Half-Life 3 speculation or calling for an Assassin's Creed game that doesn't suck. Legend has it that Titanfall 3 was well into development when Respawn decided to hard pivot to Apex Legends, and having not played it myself, a cursory scroll through various live streams shows a game with a lot of the same DNA, so it's easy to see. Titanfall 2 has been on my to playlist for years because of its sterling reputation, so I finally decided to use this video series as the excuse it is to try it out. When it was new, my reason for not picking it up had a lot to do with Titanfall 1's reception. It caught no small amount of flack for being a multiplayer-only game, so the addition of a single-player campaign in 2 felt like it couldn't be anything more than something cynically tacked on to appease its detractors. Frankly, in today's context, the idea that a game could be derided for being multiplayer-only with no single-player component feels almost quaint. Funny how the wheel turns. Regardless, there was no way Titanfall 2's single-player campaign could be anything more than a glorified tutorial for the multiplayer, which was clearly where Respawn's interest lay. Boy, was I wrong. So what's this game about? Well, you play as Matthew Mercer, who for some reason goes by the name of Jack Cooper. Mr. Cooper Mercer is a regular boot in a war that's primarily fought by robots, which feels about as futile as trying to take on Morning Rush Hour on a unicycle. While on mission dutifully fulfilling his role as cannon fodder, the Titan pilot leading the mission is killed, along with most of the rest of his unit, and he's left no choice but to take the pilot seat for himself. What follows is a romp through hordes of meat bad guys, mech bad guys, and meat piloting mech bad guys that paints the world in a glistening sheen of blood and techno T-Rex footprints. Now, I want to get my criticisms of this game out of the way first. Maybe it's just the Critical Role fan in me looking upon Mr. Mercer with health potion tinted eyes, but I swear he was the only actor in the game's voice cast pulling his weight. Most of the NPCs feel like they're phoning it in, with the possible exception of Cuban Blisk, the de facto main bad guy who makes you hate him every time he opens his apartheid-loving mouth. It was never really distracting, but in a voice cast that features the likes of Fred Tatasciore, Yori Lowenthal, and Liam O'Brien, I expected better. Like your mom when the report card comes in. I'm not mad, Titanfall 2. I'm just disappointed. From a gameplay standpoint, I don't like the way picking up weapons worked in the campaign. You pick them up from crates and from fallen bad guys, but it feels like a copy-paste of the way it would work in multiplayer without much thought for how it would translate to single player. As such, it felt difficult throughout the game to find a weapon loadout I really liked, mostly dealing with what I could find, and when I did find one I really liked, praying it didn't run out of ammo before I ran out of flesh balloons to pop. Also, it was clear that several of the levels were copy-pastes of multiplayer maps with single-player objectives layered over them. While there's really no problem with that, it did make several of the environments feel giant and empty in a way that would have felt like a waste of energy in a game that was strictly single-player, especially since you tend to be sprinting and wall running through them like Sonic the Mech Hog, so that you don't have time to take in the admittedly immaculate level design. And that sums up my criticism, so let's talk about all the ways this game slaps ass. The combat is, to put it succinctly, incredible. The gunplay is snappy and fast-paced in a way I haven't experienced since probably the first Fear, transitioning from boots-on-the-ground wall-running fun to Titan piloting steel tank power fantasy with effortless grace. I was playing it on the hardest difficulty because, as has been established, I have an inferiority complex, so Da Vinci Code myself with video game difficulty because of it, and even though the hardest difficulty means that even the most minor bad guys can kill you in the blink of an eye if you drop your guard for even a second, and some of the boss battles were a bitch and a half, it never felt unmanageable. Even when I was getting my shit pushed in, I could always see the path to victory, and each death felt like it was more due to the mistakes I made, rather than the fights themselves being unfair or the bosses being too bullet spongy, which is the mark of a good hard mode to me. It seemed like the real trick was that the bad guys could kill me just as easily as I could kill them, and if that's not the libertarian dream, I don't know what is. I mentioned the environments back there, so let's talk about traversal, because this isn't the first Respawn game I've played. That was Jedi Fallen Order, which I'm on record as loving to a nearly unhealthy degree, and Jedi Survivor is also a game that I played. Because of that, the traversal felt immediately familiar as I was wall running and double jumping like a bionic gymnast through the twisting and sprawling maps. Turns out, Respawn has a thing they do, and they do it very well. Because of the difficulty, I did find myself having to hide, abuse my cloak like a 40-year-old ex-high school football star abuses his dog, and play carefully rather frequently, which I felt was antithetical to the intended experience, but it was entirely due to the difficulty I was playing on, and I don't feel I can fault the game for my own solipsistic flagellation. The story and the campaign itself, well, I won't go into spoilers, but the framing of the world and the campaign led to some of the most creative mission design I've ever seen. Seriously, I'm very happy that, for a game that's 10 years old, the specific hooks of the individual missions weren't spoiled for me. This is absolutely a game where it's best to go in as blind as possible. The whole thing caps off with a final mission that was a pure adrenaline-fueled steel rampage, wherein you mow down wave after wave of ground troops that I didn't even take the time to shoot, just tramped on them with my giant unfeeling feet, while I poured fire into an onslaught of enemy titans that barked taunts even as their mechs burst into flame and were turned into slag under the fury of my unstoppable vengeance. Sorry, I got a little carried away there. It then caps off with an ending that, again, without spoiling, was so surprisingly emotional that it left me speechless for several minutes while credits rolled by like a Starship Troopers propaganda video. Turns out my heart isn't totally calcified. All told, I think Titanfall 2 absolutely deserves its cult status, and I think I'm gonna join the ranks of fans that I mentioned in the beginning who hold out hope for an eventual Titanfall 3. They certainly left it open for one, the way the story concluded. Personally, it's not been since the various Half-Life games, go watch my coverage on Half-Life Alyx if you want to know how I feel about those, that I've played a first-person shooter that felt so inventive and fresh. Now, if you'll excuse me, I think I'm gonna go watch Pacific Rim and build some Gunpla for no specific reason at all.